Welcome to the Generative Age,
a podcast that explores the rapidly evolving world of generative AI and its impact on education.
Guided by EdTech Director, author, and NICE board member Alana Winnick. We are joined by experts and practitioners in the field who are shaping the discourse of artificial intelligence in the classroom.
Whether you're an educator, administrator, technology leader, or simply interested in the future of education, join us on this journey through the Generative Age, powered by NICE. Hello, Generative Age community. It's been quite some time since I last posted a podcast, so I have a lot to fill you in on. The week of AI and the day of AI have both passed, and I have a lot of great resources for you about that. And there's been a lot of industry updates that were announced within that week of AI, so I'll just catch you up to speed. Google launched Learn LM, which is a suite of tools that infuses learning into every single Google surface, including search, YouTube, and Android. They've integrated generative AI directly into Google's search engine results, which actually caused quite a bit of controversy. There was a lot of misleading information, such as telling you to eat rocks and add glue to your pizza to help the cheese stick better, among many other crazy things it suggested. So I think Google is going to be taking more precautionary measures to try to make those answers more reliable. I still say always back things up with a reliable resource. In other news, Khan Academy is now releasing Khanmigo free for all educators thanks to a relationship with Microsoft. And along the Microsoft bandwagon, they've announced Copilot PCs, which are PCs that have AI built directly into the machine itself. It includes a recall feature, which turns your PC into basically a photographic memory for you, and it will allow you to co-create with all AI-powered image creation, editing, and everything built directly into the Windows machine. OpenAI released their latest version of GPT, version 4.0. The highlights include real-time translation, interaction with audio and images, and realistic and natural voice chat, which the voice chat has caused quite some controversy as well. If you haven't been following the news about this, Scarlett Johansson actually is suing OpenAI because she was shocked and angered when she heard that the voice sounded exactly like her. She was in a movie called Her, where a man fell in love with his AI assistant, and actually OpenAI CEO Sam Altman reached out to her to see if she'd be the voice, and she declined to do that. But they still released a voice that sounded very similar to hers, so she is suing them for that. So we'll see where that leads us. And one company who we don't really talk about much is Apple. Apple finally is coming to the AI game. They've always had Siri, which is sort of like an AI chatbot, but it just wasn't that great. And now finally we're getting a little upgrade to Siri with enhanced AI capabilities. And Siri will now also allow you to text if you're in a meeting, as well as having ChatGPT integration. All of these are not released yet. They've just announced them. They also have new AI writing tools, which will allow you to rewrite, sort of like we do with the AI tools we have now, and summarize text in things such as mail, notes, pages, and more. Both the Notes app and the phone, literally if you're on a phone call, you'll be able to record, transcribe, and summarize audio. So audio from notes and audio from the phone. If you do use the phone one, it will notify the person on the other end that the phone's being recorded. It doesn't just secretly do that. If you're at ISTE, please be sure to come and say hi. I think I'm leading 8 sessions total. One of them is actually a generative age panel featuring many of our esteemed guests. So please make sure you check that out. That's on Monday at 10:30 a.m. And I have about 6 other live sessions as well as exhibits in Camp Creativity. I have everything ranging from AI bias and misinformation, creativity and imagination, and empowering leaders to adapt to the AI-driven future. So if you're at ISTE, please let me know. I'd love to meet up. Now let's get to the main event with our featured guest, Matt Miller, who will also be on the panel at ISTE. Matt's an author, podcaster, speaker, consultant, and most recently, he is back in the classroom. So I'm really excited to have you here today.
How long have we been trying to set this up?
I know, that's what I was just thinking. Well, I mean, it started at ISTE when I stalked you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stalked you because I've been wanting to have you on. And then we
Yeah.
scheduled you for, it was January or February. And then when I found out you were going back in the classroom, I was like, nope, I'm pushing you down the road because I wanted to hear what was going on there. So I
Yeah.
thought that would make a more interesting episode.
Yeah, for sure. No, I thought that was super smart. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Glad I mean, I've seen some of the folks that you've had on, and I mean, you've gotten some good ones.
I have. It's been incredible. It's really
Yeah.
been awesome. I think everyone's just so generous with their time, but it's
Mhm.
also been really great to just be able to collaborate with other people. And I'm so appreciative of you taking the time, like really. And I know you're
Yeah.
probably busier than ever right now with all the stuff, like being
Yeah.
back in the classroom. It's probably wild.
It is. Yeah. It's like, I mean, teaching is obviously a more than full-time job. And then there's all of my ditch that textbook stuff on top of that. And I've got 3 kids that are all involved in sports and everything. And yeah, it's a lot, but it's also good for me to stop and reflect on what I'm doing and, getting to chat about it and stuff and everything. So no, I'm super glad we got to work this out.
So number one, how do you do it all?
So I've got a lot of help behind the scenes right now. I'm not doing it by myself, and I've kind of taken my hands off the wheel a lot and let them do this until the school year gets out.
Do you think you'll keep some of the help now that you've had a taste of it?
Yeah, for sure. I've actually had them on board helping me out for years at this point. So it's just they've never had to do the heavy lifting with some of the stuff that they're doing right now. They've never had to do it that much. So yes. And my events manager is my dad. So
Yeah.
there's no getting
I
rid of
did
him.
that when I tried to book you. I don't know if you remember this. I tried to book you before ISTE and
Yeah.
it got into your dad's inbox, not yours. And
Yeah.
he guarded you so much and wouldn't let you
Yeah.
on the podcast. And I was like, let's just see about this. When I see him at
Good.
ISTE, and I think,
Yeah.
remember I told you I tried to win you over because I was like, I'm going to give you the biggest compliment that anyone else has given you. And I told you that I featured your work in my book.
Right.
So
Yes.
yeah, so that was how I think I hooked you into
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That's a nice compliment for sure. So yeah. Yeah.
The infamous shades of gray graphic.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I call it. No one else, I don't think your dad appreciated when I called it shades of gray. It's like as you referred to it as the shades of gray graphic.
Right. Yeah. Because it really is. I mean, not like that kind of shades of gray, but yeah, that's you're right.
So I like to
Mhm.
find out fun, interesting facts about my guests
Okay.
from their colleagues. And I asked around about you. And, I know some of your close friends and colleagues pretty
Yes,
well.
you do.
Yeah. And so I learned, well, I already knew this. Like I knew you worked with your dad, and I
Yeah.
knew from trying to schedule that you would had to be around your children's sports schedule.
Yes.
But what I learned about you is that you are like the world's most incredible father. And that
Oh,
yeah. And
thanks.
that your relationship with your older daughter is like so special, and that every girl could have a dad like that. They'd be so
Oh,
lucky.
that's sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, yeah, she's getting ready to go to college. She's a senior, and she was a swimmer. She was like a high school swimmer, and so I've been one of her coaches all 4 years that she swam, and so we've gotten a whole bunch of extra time through that and everything. And so, yeah, that's sweet. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I feel like, the listener should know that you're a good family man too.
Well, thanks. Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that.
What are you going to do when she goes away? That's going to be hard.
Let's not talk about that quite yet. I don't have any tissues down here. So that's gonna be a big adjustment. She's the first one that we're gonna have, like flying the coop and
Yeah.
everything. So we'll see.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you here today. And before we do that, Matt, do you want to just give everyone a little elevator pitch of how you got to where you are today? Like your
Yeah.
career history.
You got like 2 hours for this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I taught high school Spanish for more than 10 years here in West Central Indiana. Started using technology a whole bunch in my classroom, and started presenting on it in conferences, writing about it in my blog, Ditch That Textbook. since then started doing that full time and have since written 6 books about teaching with technology, doing keynote speeches and workshops and stuff. And then just recently got an opportunity to go back in the classroom at my kids' high school to teach high school Spanish for a semester. So that semester's starting to wind down a little bit now, but it's gotten me a chance to kind of sharpen my teaching and tech chops a little bit and get back into it. And so, and I've just been super curious about AI, just like you, and just trying to learn as much as I can about it, since, there's so much going on and it has the potential to change so much. That's where we are today.
So can you tell me originally why you decided to leave the classroom and then why you decided to go back to the classroom?
Yeah, so I'd been teaching for 11 years, still totally loved it. I mean, still very much believed that, I couldn't believe that they were paying me to go in the classroom and, make up crazy stories in Spanish and, get to work with kids and stuff. It was like the absolute best, but started to get more and more opportunities to do training with teachers around technology. And I thought it was so important to be able to share what was succeeding and even some of the failures from my own classroom, and trying to help set teachers up for success. And I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it, there's a lot of bad professional development out there, and so I aspired to try to do something better and more interesting and more hands-on, and so that's why I left. But then I went back in the classroom this last semester because there was an opening at my kids' high school. The Spanish teacher was leaving mid-year, and they had a 1-semester temporary opening. And my wife teaches at that school, and my 2 daughters go to school there. And when the 3, most important ladies in your life look up at you and bat their eyes and say, please, then you generally find a way to do what they want you to do.
Yeah, so I bet a lot has changed since you were last in the classroom. And so, can you tell me a bit about the experience being back? Like, what has surprised you, both positive and negative? Like, a whole pandemic has happened, AI has come out. Like, there has been a lot of things that have happened. So, I'm just curious for you, the drastic change, both positive and negative, what you've seen and experienced.
Yeah. So when I was last in the classroom, we were just kind of getting familiar with having one-to-one devices and learning management systems. Cell phones were a common thing, but not nearly as common as before. I mean, it's been 8 years since I taught in the classroom. So in that way, I think schools are starting to get, they've got more and more tech tools available to them, different apps, different websites and stuff. And those have continued to level up since I've been gone. So the sophistication of some of the things that some of those tools can do now is definitely different than when I was there. Like you said, a whole pandemic has come and gone. And so, some people have used that to level up their tech skills. Some people have used it as a reason to hate using technology in an instructional way. Yeah. And so, all of that stuff has kind of come and gone. But I have been just very delightfully pleased at how kids are still kids. Yeah, definitely have been some changes, but some things, I mean, it's, kids are kids still in some ways, which makes me happy too.
Yeah, that's a positive. I didn't even think about that. But what it's about, like the way that it is just being a teacher in a school.
One thing that hasn't changed a ton is that there's still an awful lot that's on teachers' shoulders, and I've even noticed, post-pandemic, it seems like we're being asked to do even more, if that's even possible, than before. It was like you come into the pandemic and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you've got to teach virtually and you've got to learn all of these new tech tools and everything. But then you come out of the pandemic and all of a sudden it feels like there's still as much imposed on you. Yeah. And I just haven't seen schools and school districts take very much off of teachers' shoulders. Like it's continually more and more and more burden, and we've been at a crisis point with burnout for a long time. And so, up until this point, I think, the demands that we have on teachers and their time. And I just saw a tweet the other day about how, what would schools look like if they didn't get all of the volunteer overtime that teachers give them, but, and I think that hopefully one of my optimistic hopes out of some of the generative AI that's coming out is that it starts to lighten that burden. You know,
Yeah, that's
we've
what
just
I was
been,
gonna ask you about that. So like, there's all the things that go into being a teacher, like even if something as simple as attendance and report cards and grades and all the things that happen.
Mhm.
And you probably didn't even think about all these things being out of the classroom for so long. And then if you looked at that US Department of Education's report where they talk about how much time a teacher actually spends on the tasks they do,
Mhm.
now being an AI author, an AI speaker, you're hopefully probably using AI to help you do these things. Do you think that you are saving more time doing these tasks than your colleagues are?
Yeah, probably. That's because most of my colleagues still either haven't used it or don't really know of its capabilities. I think still, a lot of, so I work in a, rural school district here in West Central Indiana, in a pretty not very populated county in Indiana. And a lot of my colleagues, and they're not, I mean, they're still, I think we have great teachers, and some of them are learning about implementing technology and everything and are doing some good things with that, but a lot of them just haven't had the time or the inclination to start looking into some of those ways that that AI can save them time, just in the in the lesson planning and the creating instructional materials and emails. And I mean, it's like all of the stuff that everybody seems to be talking about right now. I think, even though, Alana, you and I think about AI an awful lot, and the
Yeah.
people who listen to this podcast probably think about it a lot more than the traditional teacher, I still think that we're still in the ground floor with the vast majority of teachers, which is crazy to think about, because the AI, I mean, you and I know that there are changes like every single day. There are new features being thrown into things. There's new apps, and OpenAI seems to be doing something like almost every week, it seems. And so it's like all of this stuff keeps leveling up so fast, so fast. Tech companies are pouring money into the development of artificial intelligence. Is just moving by leaps and bounds. And yet here we are in schools, still on the ground floor, still going, I haven't even used ChatGPT. You have people that'll say that. I haven't even used it yet. I don't know what it's like. But all of the kids seem to be cheating with it, and that's why I don't like it. Like we're stuck there, and it's going to take a Herculean professional development effort, I think, to start helping teachers see the possibilities.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what would be your recommendation? So if let's say a school leader is listening right now, what would you say to the school leader on how they can, as you said, elevate them above the ground floor?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just, I mean, step one, I think, is just awareness of what some of the large language model assistants like ChatGPT can do. I mean, I think that's just the simple, easy ground floor, just giving teachers a little bit of space and time. And you don't even have to bring in a consultant or sign them up for a special PD program. It's just like, give them a couple of simple prompts to plug in, like, give me some ideas for lesson plans about the Peloponnesian War. Boom. All of a sudden you start to see the possibilities, right? And I think that's just like step one right there, is to see how it can help you out. And then beyond that, I think we start to look at some of the instructional applications that you can use for it. And it doesn't even have to be student facing either. It's like, how could we use an AI assistant like ChatGPT as a debate partner? Put it up on the projector screen, put it up on the interactive display, and have the kids discuss what they would say to it. And then it turns around and kicks something back. I mean, just little things like that, where the students don't even have to lay hands on the keyboard and be the end user. I mean, like, you start to do some of that stuff. You start to see some of that teacher time saving stuff, the teacher idea generation stuff, but then also a little bit of that instructional stuff. You start to just expose them to some of that, and it starts to change the narrative a little bit. I think it doesn't totally change the narrative, because there's a lot of baggage when it comes to the cheating talk and the plagiarism talk and everything. And I think we're going to have like some serious, like, sit on the couch with a counselor and talk through our issues about this baggage, with all of the cheating talk. It's going to take a while on that, but I think that some of those easy first steps are just exposure. What can this do?
Yeah. I love that. You know, it's funny because in my own school district, I actually only me, you know, my job outside of work, I only presented one time on AI. And it was really just so that my staff knew my position. And this was last school year. I said, this is what it is. These are the amazing things you could do with it. I support you. I want you to try it and use it. Go for it. And ever since that one time, I really am all about empowering the teachers in my own district. I mean, like, you're doing this great thing, you're doing this great thing, you're doing this great thing. And at faculty meetings, I have now within the hour, I only do 2. I tried to be ambitious and do 3, but it didn't really, it was too much. So each teacher will teach one quick thing and they'll showcase how they use it or how their students use it. And then everyone in the room tries it. And then they walk away with one new thing they could do the next day. And they learned 2 new skills in that faculty meeting. And one of them was exactly what you said. We had a prompt for them, like a Mad Libs fill in the blank. And for everyone listening, I'll put it in the slide deck for you. One of my teachers created it, and it was like you fill in your grade, the subject you're teaching, what content area standards you want to hit. And there's like a Mad Libs style thing. Walk out immediately with a lesson plan. Everyone was like mind blown by it. But
Yeah.
all it takes is putting it in their hands one time.
And you know what I love about that too, about what you were just saying, is if you do that little by little by little, just like you were saying, you know, you show up to staff meetings and like one little piece every so often, you know what you're doing is you're slowly starting to change the narrative. You're slowly starting to change the culture of how everybody thinks. You know, you come in and you try to do one great big workshop where you throw all of those things in there, and it's like, that'll have some impact for some people. But if there's like little by little by little over time, all of a sudden, I love the way that Seth Godin frames this. You know, he's like a marketing guru, and he says culture is defined as this. He says it's people like us do things like this. He says that's how you define culture, is people like us do things like this. And what you just described is like little by little by little, they're starting to go, oh, we do things like this. I tried that. That actually worked. That's one little, it's like little by little, you're starting to shift the culture away from this is bad, this is scary, this is going to be harmful and only detrimental, to it's like you're starting to shift the culture to, oh, we can use this.
Yeah.
Oh, this can help us.
And you know what else I do? If the faculty meeting's not about AI, what I'll do is I'll have a little icebreaker, because I always try to model for teachers what they could be doing with their students, always. So that's why I like to have the teachers teach each other, and then they could do something like that with their students. But if it's not an AI faculty meeting, as the icebreaker, I'll be like, go find someone you don't normally work with and tell them one new thing you tried with AI since we last talked about it. And then I make them switch 2 times. And then when we come back together, I say, who wants to tell me something interesting you heard? Then no one's saying, I did this, you're sharing something you heard. So people are more likely to share when they're not talking about themselves. So that's another way that I found that really works and just gets the conversation to continue.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And, you know, it's like whenever you can uplift your colleagues and stuff, I think that's huge. But then also, you know, you're hearing from lots of people. And again, it's a culture shifter, isn't it? It's like you're starting to hear other people saying, I used it this way, I used it this way, I used it this way. And the overarching message out of all of that is, wow, a lot of people are actually using this and using it in good ways. See, I think that's one of the big things. You can do the nuts and bolts of what can you do with AI, but if you want to shift culture, it's like little by little, day by day, you show up and go, this is helpful and this is going to improve your life.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of ways you use it, the questions that I usually ask every interviewer, but it's kind of just flowing, so I'm going to go there. Can you tell me one creative way you use it personally and one creative way you use it professionally?
Yes. So one of my favorite ways to use AI personally is that I'll keep one of the AI assistant apps on my phone. I actually had been using Pi for a while, and I just would ask it all sorts of like things that just occurred to me. And I would do this, and I would usually like voice type with it. So that I can do it, you know, like in the car while I'm driving, and then it would like, you know, talk back to me and tell me the response. Or I would even do it when I'm out on a run. You know, I'm like running along and I think of something. And a lot of times it's just not even educational things. Like for instance, I'm a big fan. I'm a football fan. I like watching football. I'm from Indiana, so I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan. And the more that I would study the team, I realized that they have the kind of defense that they use is called a cover 3 zone defense. And so I didn't know what that was about. So one day for about 20 minutes, I just went back and forth with Pi and asked it a million questions about a cover 3 defense. And I learned a lot of stuff, so that's one of the things I love to do with it personally, is just find all of these bonkers off the wall things that I'm curious about in the world and see what AI has to say about it. And then professionally,
how do you know it's true?
well, I guess you don't. Well, you do to some extent. I mean, it's plausible, right? It's plausible that it makes sense. But again, it's like whenever you're whenever you're out doing an internet search, like, how do you know that that's true? Whenever one of your, I think that's another thing that's kind of like a life skill these days. If you're talking to a colleague or a friend or a loved one and they tell you, oh, you'll never believe what just happened, how do you know that that's true? It's like anymore, truth is sort of, it's a tricky thing to come by, so but I also do know that AI is less likely to hallucinate on the topics I was talking to it about, because it has all of this information in its data set, so I feel a little more confident in it. So
yeah, why'd you pick Pi? I'm just curious, what made you go with that one?
Well, part of it was that I was curious about it because it was different. It's a more conversational model than, like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and everything are like, what do you need me to do? Yes, sir, right away. And then Pi, it's funny, they've trained Pi and they've, adjusted the parameters on Pi and everything so that it comes at you more like, hey, how you doing? Tell me about your day. What's going on? And it's like it engages you in conversation and it asks you follow-up questions and stuff. And so I was just curious about it. And it's just a sort of a different experience there. So I think, if I'm doing this on the go and I'm asking questions conversationally, I kind of like Pi because it really does sort of engage you in a conversation instead of, like the cold static, give me the answer and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Have you tried Perplexity? Do you use that one at all?
I have some. Yeah. One of the things I love about Perplexity is how transparent it is about where it gets its information. I think that's the thing that definitely sets that one apart.
Yeah, so I use that with elementary school students, and it's a great lesson for them on media literacy. Like, where are the sources and what's considered a reliable resource? And I have 8-year-olds having conversations about like reliable resources. It's really impressive. They were doing a biography unit and they were doing research on a person, and like one resource that came up was like Red Bull. Would Red Bull be a reliable resource? But it's an athlete. So probably if the sports team is sponsored by Red Bull, right, it's probably reliable, but you normally wouldn't think Red Bull would be reliable. So it makes them think about these conversations and have these really interesting conversations about it. So I really love Perplexity because it forces them to look at where the data is coming from. And I think that's just another layer of an important lesson that's not really AI related, but about media literacy and reliability.
Yeah, for sure.
And what about professionally? So as your personal one, what about your professional one?
Yeah. So in my high school Spanish classes, I've used AI in a variety of different ways. I've done some student-facing chatbots through School AI, which has been okay. I don't feel like I spent enough time with it to get the prompting right to get what I wanted out of it. So I've tried it in a couple of different ways, but I think my favorite thing so far professionally in the classroom, in a high school Spanish classroom, is using AI image generators.
Same.
Because,
oh my goodness, same.
Right? Because see, for me as a language teacher, I can look at whatever my students are studying. So for instance, just recently we had a chapter where they had animal vocabulary and sports vocabulary. So I was like, there is one logical thing that I need to do with an AI image generator on this. I need animals playing sports.
For sure.
And so what did I do? I just started picking random animals and random sports and smashing them together and seeing what it came up with. And there was so much good stuff there. So what do we do with that? I put those images up on the screen and I tell the kids, I've got some AI images for you. And so now we've gotten into this routine where before we start describing them in Spanish, I say, take a look at this picture and point out any AI weirdness. And so they're looking for the fingers. They're looking for the road that doesn't connect all the way through. And we've gotten to the point where we're doing that. And I feel like that's kind of important.
For sure.
That even though I'm not teaching AI, I'm not a computer science teacher, but I can start to help them identify things that show that something's made by AI. And that they can start to
conception that every teacher thinks, I'm not a computer science teacher, I shouldn't be teaching it. That's everyone should be teaching all these things as they're coming up and happening.
Yeah. And see, I think one of our great opportunities to help kids prepare for that is not that we have to teach AI lessons. It's that we're willing to talk about it a little bit in the cracks and in the in-between times. It's like I'm mostly putting that picture up there so we can describe it in Spanish. And that's what we're doing for the vast majority of the time. But we do a little, I like to call these by the way lessons.
Yeah.
A by the way lesson where I go, oh, by the way, did you know that, AI sometimes does weird things with images, and there are certain places where you can find the weirdness. That's a by the way lesson. And so we're doing kind of like a version of that where we take just a couple of moments and we identify some of the things about the AI images, and then we start talking about them. So then I start asking them, questions so that we can get repetitions with those new words and stuff. And that's probably my absolute favorite way to use it in the language classroom.
And I also really do want to dive into that because I haven't had anyone on specifically talking about language learning with AI.
Sure.
And I think I use it a lot. The classroom directly across the hall from my technology office is the French room. So I do pop in there a lot. And I do, and she's one of my ISTE certified educators and on the tech team. So I definitely am a big fan of AI in the language classroom. I think there's so many incredible things that I can tell you that I've done with it, but I really want to ask you about all the cool things that you've done in your language classroom.
Yeah, so the AI image generation is probably the best thing that I've done so far because it's quick and easy to do. I've played with a variety of different image generators, and my favorites probably at this point are Midjourney and Ideogram. Now, Midjourney is one of the few AI tools that I will pay money for. So I've got their like basic plan, which is like $10 a month.
My logo is made with Midjourney.
Ooh, nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so fellow like Midjourney fans here. So yeah, I love using Midjourney, but then Ideogram has been fantastic. It gives you I think it's like 25 free credits a day or something like that. So you can go in and generate a lot of images on their free plan. And I really feel like the quality that you get out of that is just as good as Midjourney. But then what it will also do is it takes your prompt and then it uses a large language model to take your prompt and improve on it so that the images in the end are better because it has improved your prompting. So between those two,
you what it did, does it give you feedback on what it changed? Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it shows you the original prompt and then it shows you what it calls the magic prompt, which is much longer and expands. And sometimes I find that some of the decisions that it makes in the magic prompt isn't exactly what I was looking for. So then you can go into the magic prompt and you can edit it yourself. So you really still have a longer, more detailed prompt. But if there are things, like for instance, I was trying to, for a presentation, I was trying to come up with a car driven by a robot to, kind of illustrate autonomous vehicles. But then what I found was it was prompting for the person in the back seat to be like scared. I was like, no, I don't want it to be scared. I want the person to be calm. I want them to be at ease. Yeah. And so I went into the magic prompt and I changed it so that it said that the person was like looking at their cell phone or reading a book or something. And then the results were even better. So
fun fact about Midjourney though, and then I want to tell you something about prompting, but in your Ditch That textbook work, did you know that Midjourney, if you use the paid version of Midjourney, then you are allowed to use your images for commercial use?
So
that's, I think, Yeah, that was being very careful because on my book, it's, I'm selling a book.
Yes.
And that if you use an AI image that doesn't follow the rules, then you
Mhm.
could get in trouble, right? So
Right.
we're talking about the shades of gray in AI use.
Yeah.
I was very careful with what I was allowed and not allowed to use. But if you have the paid version of Midjourney and you create an image, you can actually sell your image and make money off of it.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I know. So you can create images and sell them if you want.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I had a question. So you talked a lot about you using image generators to get
Mhm.
conversation going in the classroom. Have
Yeah.
you ever done the flip side of that where the students are using the AI image generators?
Mhm.
And
Yeah. So we have at my school we have Canva accounts for all of the kids, and so I had them log in one day, and I thought, oh, certainly Magic Media is going to be blocked for the students. I thought there's no chance, right? So Magic Media, if you're listening, Alana, I know you know this, but like Magic Media inside of Canva is it's AI image generator and among other things. It's like
Padlet has it too. If you don't have Canva and you have Padlet, it's built in there too. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So one day I just had him pull it up and, just kind of play with it at the end of class. And all of a sudden, boom, there it is. So one day there's like a 3-day project that we did. It was a storytelling project. And I said, I want you to write these sentences, put them onto slides, and then illustrate them with AI generated pictures. So then again, the students got a little bit of practice at prompting to try to get it to create the AI images that they wanted. So I have had them do some of that where students are actually the ones generating the images. And we found that the image generator inside of Canva wasn't as good as some of the other ones, as like Ideogram and Midjourney and everything. We had, someone had a picture of somebody riding a horse that had 6 legs, and it's just like that stuff that you generally find. And I said, go ahead and put the weirdness into your presentation. It's okay. But it was, it wasn't like a fantastic, like flawless product that they were creating, but it was a really good first step into dabbling with that stuff and seeing that it can actually be used for good academic purposes and not just for doing your essays for you.
I just popped up this. I wanted to show you. This is one lesson we did in foreign language in my district. So they were learning how to describe faces in a different language. This one happens to be French. And the students they're learning all of like eyes, nose, ears, mouth, colors, all the things. And so they had to describe either themselves or a character, and they'd use a lot of descriptive language. And then we popped their description into an AI image generator to see how close the AI image could get to what had the vision they had in their head. That was really incredible lesson. They had to go back to refine the prompt to be more specific, but another, by the way, lesson that popped up that we learned really fast was about AI bias and discrimination. And unless you specifically tell it the skin color you want, you're going to get 100% white. And that does not reflect the population of my students. We only have a 40% white population. So that was a very fascinating, by the way, lesson that happened while we were trying that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's another one of those opportunities to have a little conversation. I think you're spot on there, where if we know a little bit about generative AI and the things that students need to know, if we're just ready whenever it comes up in conversation, then those little bitty conversations might stick in our students' minds just as much or better than if we had prepared a whole lesson about. I mean, imagine if a teacher shows up and they decide they're going to lecture for 15 minutes about AI bias. At some point, the kids are going to just tune out. But if you give them like a little 60-second conversation about it because it just happened, like those in the moment things are even better, I think.
For sure. I agree. Another way we use it in our foreign language department is they use it for like reading passages to make passages in different languages. But it's really great because then they can ask it to rewrite it in different tenses. They can make leveled versions of the reading passages. They can come up with discussion questions to have about the passage. So I think I see it used probably the most in our foreign language teacher in our foreign language department, because I don't know, I found it to be really wonderful.
Yeah, I've used it some to create reading passages and, comprehension questions out of it and everything, but I'm also really picky about the verb tenses that it uses and making sure that it sticks tightly to the vocabulary that students have learned, or if it's, comprehensible, understandable language. And I've found that I have a hard time with some of the large language model assistants like ChatGPT, or
Yeah.
even with tools like, like Diffit or something. I mean, Diffit's come a long way on that kind of stuff, but like having these create something that's right on the level that I want it to be. And even if you ask it to stick to a specific verb tense, a lot of times it kind of goes all over the place. I've also found that with the student facing AI chatbots, if I've tried to set up a little conversation practice chatbot, the longer that students respond to it, the more all over the place the conversation goes. So I've either found that it strays out of the guardrails that I give it, or it just goes, or it's like so tight, it's so tightly, to the things that I ask it to do, that it's just boring. It's almost like, what's this word? What's this word? What's this word? And it's like, that's not good teaching. But, if it goes way beyond what my students are doing, it's like trying to find that happy medium in the middle. I know they're eventually going to get there. I just have had a hard time getting exactly what I want out of all of those.
For sure. Have you looked at one vendor that I'm doing a webinar with this week is Quizalize, and they have a new tool that they're coming out with called Marvelly. And I found it really interesting. So you'd actually really probably love this. This one specific tool is for language learning, and it's actually like a verbal chat bot. So you talk to this little avatar, and let's say the task of it, this one particular scenario would be to purchase something from the store. So you're talking to the person in the store, and there's a store behind them, and there's like 3 questions that you have to get out, and you have to converse with that avatar and try to hit those 3 assessment pieces. Have you used any types of AI like that with your students, or no? Not yet.
Not yet. But
Well,
now I know about another one that I can try.
that would make your life so much easier if you're like, these are the targets I'm trying to get out of my students. And if you put up those parameters and the AI assess them in their speaking, that would be pretty cool. All right. So now next question. Where do you draw the line? When would you never, ever use AI?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I think the tricky part there is trying to figure out what we define as use. So like, I mean, it goes back to, like for instance, with student writing, like if you use spell check, do you consider that having used AI? If you had an AI assistant like ChatGPT write the whole thing, would you consider that having used AI? And so you can see those are 2 sides of the spectrum. And so it's like, where do you draw the line there? For the purposes of our conversation, I'll draw the line at,
I guess it's literally your shades of gray graphic. Like, where do you draw the line like in your own work?
Yes. Yeah, it really is. So, I'll say like having it do significant heavy lifting of doing the writing for me instead of editing the writing that I do myself. I mean, really, a lot of my ditch that textbook work, I write blog posts with teaching ideas in them, and I've written books. And, with all of those things, I still personally feel like I want to do the creation of that myself. So I guess that's where I would draw the line. Would I ask AI for ideas of things that I could write about? I'd be okay with that. That would be in front of the line, so to speak. That wouldn't cross the line. If I wanted it to improve the writing that I've already done, that wouldn't be crossing the line. But for me, the actual creation of the text itself, I think that's probably where I would draw the line.
Okay, so now because we're talking about drawing the line, let's just dive right into the
Yes.
Okay. So I see that you've done a new version of it. I have not seen this version. This is lovely and wonderful.
Yeah.
When I saw this, I was like, I need to write a whole section in my book about it. It was exactly what people I think needed to see.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let you talk about it.
Oh, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So this graphic that you're talking about, this is something that I very first presented. So ChatGPT came out in November of 2022. I first presented this at a conference in January 2023, and I had no idea what I was creating. But this was it just sort of made sense in my mind. It was, maybe it's the language teacher in me, I don't know, looking at this and going, what do we mean? You're right. This really is the same question I was just trying to answer with, where do you draw the line? It's like, what do we mean by using AI? Because I think a lot of teachers have a very sort of binary, love it or hate it, yes or no, AI or no AI way of looking at it. But really, there's a lot of nuance on it. It's almost like a spectrum. And it's kind of the same spectrum that we've been dealing with lots of technology. We do this with search engines and Wikipedia and, all of that stuff. And so the question is, like, how much AI is acceptable, is appropriate for this task? And instead of trying to say, yes, AI is good, no, AI is bad, it's like, in what way do we want to use it? So for this, I'm all about, transparency with students and being clear from the get-go about what's okay and what's not. And so I started out, I made this graphic, and if you've not seen it before, by the way, you can get a version of this by going to ditch.link/AI spectrum. ditch.link/AI spectrum, and that'll get you like a downloadable PDF copy of the newest version. But basically what it does is it goes from the top of the spectrum, where it's very, very heavily AI generated, down to the bottom of the spectrum, where it's very, very heavily human generated. And so if you go all in between the spectrum, there's all of these different versions. The original version I made had six things on it. And then the newer version has 12 things on it. And so, it goes from something at the very top, very, very heavily AI generated, that says AI does the student work for them with no thought by the student. Well, I think we can all agree that that's something that we don't want. We still want students to think. We don't want them to copy and paste, prompt and paste.
Unless you are a computer science teacher and you are trying to have them write a reflection on what the AI app generated, then maybe you do want them to not edit the work, because the assignment really is to analyze it from a computer science perspective.
Yeah.
So I guess
that's like the 1%, but you're right.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is that it goes from the top there, where it's like probably way, way, way too much AI, but then it goes down to the bottom, which is like more human work. And so the bottom section says student does all of the work with no assistance from AI and no assistance from the internet. And I'll ask teachers, I'll say, is that cheating? And pretty much everybody says no. And I say, okay, but is this representative of the world that kids are going to live in when they go do their work?
No.
And the answer is no. Exactly. And so that's where we start to get into the middle of all of this. This is what I call the messy middle. This is where it all depends on what you're trying to do as a teacher and what the assignment is, the context. That decides how much AI is appropriate. And so I think what people love about this graphic is that it has, the newest version has 12 examples of more AI, less AI, like all up and down the spectrum. It's like you keep using, and I use also the term shades of gray. It's like, there's all of these different variations between black and white, and you don't really know what you're looking at. And see, if we're not careful and we're not very specific about how we want students to use it, then it's going to be up to the student to figure out which shade of gray is the one that the teacher is talking about. And that's a hard thing to put on a student, is to figure out which variation of this is okay, especially if you haven't talked them through it yet. And so then what happens? You even have well-meaning kids who might slip into well, I don't know how much of this I'm supposed to use, but I got to get this done. And man, I'm tired. I would love to go to bed. Man, I'd really love to go play Fortnite right now. So what do? They go to the path of least resistance if they haven't been taught otherwise.
Yeah. So districts have AI policies and there's guidelines, and I have lots of strong opinions on all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that AI use is going to not only vary from district to district, building to building, teacher to teacher, but
Mm-hmm.
really assignment to assignment. And I think that you as a teacher might say you can use AI this way for this assignment, and tomorrow you're going to have a different assignment. It's going to look very different of what
Mm-hmm.
you're calling acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole thing really is about empowering teachers, which I hope everyone knows that that's like my main goal, is empowering our teachers and students, and empowering teachers to make those guidelines within their own classrooms, within their own
Yes.
assignments. And I think, it goes back to what we were talking about before with professional development. And I think there's a difference between a position and a policy. I think that every district should have a position, every administrator, and if they're a building administrator, should have a position, and every teacher should have a position with their students. And I think that people confuse position and guidelines with policy.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? We don't need to have a whole conversation about policy because I know that could
Yeah.
get sticky, but can you tell me a bit about what you think like assignment guidelines could look like and how teachers might be able to implement this with their own students?
Yeah. I think, yeah, assignment guidelines. I really like the way that you framed that because like you were saying, I totally agree that, based on what you want the students to do in the assignment, the amount of AI use that you're going to use is potentially going to change. So I think if the teacher sort of ahead of time will say, here's the purpose of the assignment, here's why we're trying to do this, here's how AI will be helpful to you. And see, I think that's another part of just the whole framing of all of this is
Right.
instead of looking at it as, here's what I don't want you to do, I think we also have to say, here's what I do want you to do.
Oh my goodness.
Here's how it would be helpful, right? It's a small shift, but it's an important one because again, we're setting the culture here. We don't want to just like talk about all of the punitive things that we want to do. We want to empower kids to use this in the right way. And so I think that's one thing that comes into those assignment guidelines. There's a protocol that I saw recently in a presentation by AJ Giuliani. I was just at the Learning in the Brain conference in New York City, and AJ was presenting, and right next door to me.
Told me when you were here. This is where I am right now.
Oh gosh, wow. Though
Yeah.
that's a missed opportunity. I didn't even think about it. Sorry.
We could have recorded live, Matt.
Oh yeah, that's right. How far are you from Times Square?
Oh, I mean, anywhere in the city is 20 minutes away, 30 minutes.
Yeah, man, I wish we would have thought of this. Anyway, I was at this conference. I was right next door to AJ Giuliani, and he was talking about, he's not the only one I've seen present on this, but he was talking about the red, yellow, green light protocol, where you're talking about, I don't want you to use AI assistants. That's the red light. You can use them under certain circumstances. That's the yellow. And then, green light is go. And I think that's a real simple one, especially if you get down to the specific tool you want students to use. Like, if you start to have more and more of those student facing AI chatbots like your Conmigo or your School AI or your Magic Student or whatever, those ones that students are allowed to use under the terms of use because they're old enough.
Right.
If they get into one of those tools, I think the red, yellow, green framework is a good place that teachers can go. But I think once they get familiar with that, they might start to see, oh, there's a shade again between the red and the yellow. So maybe this is more of an orange, or maybe they just start to spell out, this is okay, this is okay, this isn't okay. And, maybe eventually you start to have students reflect on that, and the students start to have more input on it. I mean, it's a process, right? You want to start simple. And like you said, Alana, you want to empower teachers to get started real simple. But the more that they do it, the more that teachers get good at being specific at what they're looking for. It's going to take a lot of time, but that's sort of the progression that I can see.
Right. And I think for me, every teacher's in a different place on their journey. Some are a lot further along than others. And I just say, as long as you're on the journey, I don't care where you are. And taking the teachers that are doing great things and having them share what they're doing that's all about building that community and culture that we could go back to. But I do want to go back to your positivity thing. So like
Yeah.
while I was writing the book, I was so fortunate that I was at a conference and the keynote speaker was Richard Collada, SECO.
Mm,
I got to sit down with him one-on-one and talk to him about my book while I was writing it. And honestly, that one conversation, I went back and rewrote my entire book. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of seeing him keynote in the past like year or two, but
mm-hmm.
the one piece of advice that he gave me, and I wrote it, literally, I wrote it into the book,
Yeah.
was it's called an acceptable use policy. And if you go to your school district's acceptable use policy, I bet you, if you count it, there how many don'ts there are and how many
Yes.
there are, they're all don'ts. And like going back to culture, we don't want to create a culture of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. When my superintendent came to my district, it was like we have a very big community. We try to include like the community into our district a lot. It was like no dogs, don't do this, don't do that. He took down all those signs and he just put up one sign that says welcome. And
Yes.
like, come on, that is so much, that's such a better culture.
Yeah.
But going back to this, don't and do, where you're saying the guidelines, we do want you to do this, we do want you to do that. I think that that is so incredible. I actually rewrote the whole book with a
Yeah.
positive framework after I was like, why did I not think of that?
Yeah. And you know what else happens whenever you focus too much on the don'ts? It forces kids to not have to think anymore. Because what
Yeah.
are they doing? They're just going down through the don'ts. Did I check this box? Did I check this box? Did I check this box? And when you have all of these don'ts, it's like all of a sudden all of the decisions are made for you. And you don't have to figure out what's appropriate, what's right. How do I make this decision? Like I would rather, have a handful of general guiding principles and then have students talk about why they did what they did afterwards. I think that creates thinking students that are prepared to navigate all of this stuff when they get into college in the real world.
Yeah. Okay, so now, because we're talking about cheating a bit, I know that some teachers use AI detectors. I, first of all, they don't work, but
Right.
regardless of them not working, I really feel strongly about the type of culture that that builds because I think it
Yes.
builds a very negative culture where you're like saying, I caught ya, I caught ya. So you do have this shade, the shades of gray or whatever you want to call it, this spectrum here. So has there ever been an instance now that you're back in the classroom where you really thought that a student was in quotes cheating?
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle it or how would you handle it if you haven't? And also, what advice would you give to teachers that are in this kind of scenario?
Yeah. Spanish teachers have been dealing with this for a long time. So have math teachers because, the language teachers have had online translators around for a long time. And photo math has been around for the math teachers too. We've been in this boat for a long time, way before ChatGPT came around. So yeah. And I actually came into a classroom this semester where the students had been using online translators pretty heavily before me. And so again, we're talking about culture shift here, right? And so it's been a lot of those little bitty moments where I'm showing students, hey, I'm paying attention. Hey, here is the standard that we expect. And I'm also going to do everything that I can to empower you to meet that standard. I feel like that's a big reason. That one right there, that's a big reason that kids use AI is because they don't know how to do what they're being asked to do. And so if I do my part as a teacher to make sure that they are equipped to meet the standard that I want, beyond the shadow of a doubt, then they're not going to have to go out and use AI to do it. In fact, I've had a number of little comments from my students that have made their way back to me because people will come back and tell me. And one of the things that I had a student tell an adult who then came back and told me, they said, I don't feel like I need to, they used the word cheat, but they meant use an online translator to do my work. I don't feel like I need to do it anymore because I know how to do what I need to do. And see, that's part of the thing too, is making sure that the support is there, the scaffolding is there to get students where they need to go so that they don't get an assignment and they're like, I don't even know how to do this.
Right.
So I think that's a big piece of it, to make sure that students aren't using it irresponsibly, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I just wanted to hear what you had to say about it,
Yeah,
'cause
of course.
back in the classroom, so it's really relevant. This one I think is really great that you brought up this today glasses and tomorrow glasses. What I always say in everything I do is that at our core, our job as educators is to prepare students for their future. Like
Yes.
their future, it's not our future. And the reality is AI is here, it's not going anywhere. And if we don't prepare them to be successful in their future, they're going to be at a disadvantage. And Holly and I talked about it last time. It creates a really big equity gap between students that know how to use it and use it the right way and the students that don't. So do you want to talk a little bit about this today glasses thing? Because I really, really loved that.
Yeah, it's just basically what you were saying there, that you know, a lot of schools are looking at the problems that they need to solve today, the way that the world is today, the way that the workforce is today, the way that college is today, and they try to solve those problems. But the problem with that, like you mentioned, and you know, I think we all agree with, is that our kids' future isn't today. And of course, we can't tell the future. We want to prepare them to be nimble and agile to respond to whatever changes come in the future. I'd rather teach them to think. I'd
Yeah.
rather teach them to solve problems.
Yeah.
I'd rather teach them to look at their situation and go, how can I improve upon that? Rather teach them how to have ethical conversations and make smart decisions about them, so that when we have those ethical dilemmas that come up because of AI, they're prepared for it. So it's like, yeah, we want them to know about some of the basics of AI and how it's implemented and when you should and shouldn't use it. But some of it is really just smart critical thinking and problem solving. And so that's an example, I think, of
How do you,
preparing kids with our tomorrow glasses.
okay, but how do you teach those things?
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. Like it's the same way that we've been teaching problem solving, and we've been teaching critical thinking, and we've been teaching how to work our way through ethical situations. I think we've just got to continue to double down on that.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that I think it's misguided to say, let's just teach kids AI because AI is the future. That's just as misguided as saying, let's teach kids coding because coding's the future.
You know,
The
it's
technology is going to change. I think we've just got to make sure that they know, make sure that they're in a position to adapt to whatever comes their way. And some of that stuff we've been teaching in schools since the dawn of time, you know? I mean, it's kind of like the old school stuff. Some of the old school stuff is what's going to prepare them for this high-tech future.
You know, you really hit it on the head because everyone always asks me, like, what PD are you doing next in your district, or what PD would you offer if I'm maybe doing consulting? And the funny thing is, I always say, like, it's not about the AI. Like, it is about the AI, but it's not. AI
Right.
really is the catalyst for change. The change that should have happened a really, really long time ago and never happened. And now it's forcing us to make the change. And nothing I ever suggest in anything that I do is not anything that there's not like data to back it up and prove it for years and years. Like project learning, we know it works. Design thinking, we know it works. And it's really just about, I think, you know, the future of teaching, learning, and assessment. So this kind of led us to what I really do as the last question, which is, how do you envision the future of education in a world with artificial intelligence? Except it's going to sound so much better coming from our good friend, Holly. So here's a prompt that Holly left for you, and then you have to answer her prompt.
Okay.
I would like to know from Matt exactly what you kind of asked me at the end. If he were to say 5 years from now, what a classroom looks like on 2 levels. First level, what do you hope it looks like because of artificial intelligence and the way it's changed education? And then what do you think it will really look like because of the limitations in the education system?
All right.
She's so smart to frame it in that way. Again, all we're doing here is we're just putting on our futurist hat, right? And trying to make our best guesses. So 5 years from now, what do I hope it's going to look like? Well, I hope that we will have transformed the kinds of assignments that we have students do. because right now we're doing a lot of the write a paragraph about this, write an essay about this, fill in this worksheet about this thing. And when you have AI tools that can answer all of those for you, then you're going to be, killing yourself, banging your head against the wall, trying to deal with students that realize that, AI can do a lot of that stuff. So, that we will have transformed some of these writing assignments, transformed some of these student thinking assignments so that they're using AI as a collaborator instead of a way to do a poorly designed task. I'm hoping that it's going to be some of that. I also hope that the student AI collaboration between a chatbot or whatever it looks like in 5 years is smarter and is done at a higher level of critical thinking. That's what I hope that it's going to look like. In 5 years, what I think it's actually going to look like.
Yeah.
I mean, we already know that schools are slow moving institutions. And education is a slow moving institution. And we have a lot of teachers right now that don't really know a whole lot about AI and what it's capable of. And so I think it's kind of like, you look at post COVID and we thought after COVID, after everybody's used technology so much, our tech chops will be so much better and we will level up teaching and learning because of it. And what did we do? We came back to a lot of the same stuff that we've always done before. And so I'm afraid that even though the potential is out there to level up the level of thinking and the level of student creation and the way we give feedback, like all of these nourishing, rich learning things that we can do in the classroom that we can improve on, I think we're probably not going to. I think there will be pockets of innovation where there will be classrooms and schools and even entire school districts that do a fantastic job of it and changes the game. But again, it's like you and Holly were discussing. That again starts to create an achievement gap, an equity gap between the ones that have access to the ones who are using it really well and the ones that don't. That's what I think it's actually going to look like.
No, it's really sad because it has so much potential. Like a parent that has enough money to get their child a tutor to help them with their college acceptance and, the essay writing and all of those things, for someone who doesn't, that might have an AI tutor be able to help them, but they don't know how to use it the right way. We're going to see it, disadvantages just from getting into college or getting a job or beyond that. Like if you start your own job, what you can do.
Yeah. And, I don't even necessarily think that it's going to be a money thing either. I'm glad that you went there because right now, right, that's an issue right now, but it's going to be the teachers that are willing to figure out how to do it and how to level things up. So that may be a professional development gap, or it might be an open-mindedness gap, where if the teachers are willing to go there and willing to try all of that, they're the ones that are going to see the big gains, and that's the other ones that aren't, that are going to be frustrated. And so then what happens if you're in a city and you find out that this one school is starting to make leaps and bounds, even though they're not as funded as well? You start to send your kid there. And then what about that private school that has a ton of funding, but is so traditional because everybody's so resistant to trying things, and yet they keep falling behind, and they get frustrated? All of a sudden, there's going to be a flight away from that to maybe an open-minded public school. See, in that case, it's almost like open-mindedness and trying things with AI becomes the currency, the same way that money has been to some extent.
I know. And this really levels the playing field where money is not the differentiator, which that's what I find so incredible about it.
Yeah, it's going to impact things, I think. A lot of things still follow the money, but I think there's still the opportunity for, the schools that want to do great things with this and want to do right by kids, that are going to open up a lot of these opportunities that other kids don't.
Yeah. All right. So we're winding down now. So I just want to, before I ask people how to find you, we never really talked about your book. So can you tell us about your book? Because we never talked about it.
Yes, I would love to. It's called AI for Educators. I like to describe it as a sort of quick page turner. It's kind of like an introduction for a lot of teachers. I tried to write it in a way so that it didn't feel like a geeky, techie, boring, teacher book. So it's got a decent amount of, like storytelling and analogies and lots of practical classroom uses. And it goes through sort of like what AI is, what are its implications on school, what are some practical ways you can use it, and then a little bit of look at cheating and plagiarism. I'm going to put my air quotes around those words, and then a little bit about the future and where we're headed. So it's kind of like if you want to get a good kind of like 101 level understanding of what all of this is and what it means, then my book is probably for you.
Love that. And now, what makes you different than all these other AI people out there?
I don't know. And it's so funny that you mentioned the words, quote unquote AI people.
Yeah.
I think some people are getting frustrated because they say, oh, there's all of these people that say that they're AI experts.
Yeah.
A lot of us aren't saying that we're AI experts. We're saying
know.
that we're educators and we're trying to help other people understand how AI can impact education.
Yeah.
And that's really all that a lot of us are doing. But for
Yeah.
me personally, I think one of the things that sets me apart is I'm doing a lot of talk about what is acceptable and what's not. Plus, I'm also doing a lot of practicality, like what are some ways that you can use this in class right away? Because I think examples a lot of times are what help teachers to understand what's possible. When you see a really good example, then you're willing to remix it and change it and own it. But if we talk in generalities too much, you miss that. So I'm being real big on practicality and also kind of like, what's acceptable, what's not.
I love that. All right. So Matt, where can people find you if they want to look for you?
Best place to go is my website, ditchthattextbook.com. It's where I've been publishing articles and sharing things about teaching and technology in meaningful ways for more than 10 years. So you're able to find me there. My email newsletter is the best way to keep up with all of the things that I'm sharing. In fact, if you're listening to this and you go to ditch.link/join, you can join it. And I'm just sharing practical things you can use in class right away, kind of all throughout the week. But I'm also on the socials too. I'm still big on Twitter. I'm trying to do some more stuff on TikTok, believe it or not. So those are all places you can find me.
So there might not be a TikTok eventually.
Yeah, there will always be a vertical short form video, I think. So
for sure.
We'll see. We'll see how that all works out.
I need to get on that bandwagon. I haven't done much of that vertical video. I know Holly's big into that.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. So thank you, Matt, so much. It's been really great getting to know you on here. And finally, like it took, I don't know, since last June, it's almost a year that
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we finally got to do it. And I thank you so much for your time. And I will see you in a few months at ISTE.
Yes.
And we're going to have the generative age panel. So that will be really fun when we get everyone reunited again.
Yes. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. We're winding down for our last few days of school. So you're almost there. You're almost at the finish line. And make sure you detach and relax for a little bit this summer so you can recharge and re-energize for the new school year. Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Generative Age, powered by Nightscape. For a deeper dive, check out my new book titled, How'd You Guess? The Generative Age, now available on Amazon.
Our journey may pause here, but the conversation doesn't need to end.
Stay connected and informed by following me on social media at Alana Winnick and subscribing to my newsletter, all conveniently accessible on my website, alanawinnick.com.
Don't just listen, be a part of it. With your free Nightscape membership, you can join these live discussions, enroll in our free Generative Age Nightscape community, where you can share resources, ask questions, and collaborate with like-minded colleagues. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider leaving a review and telling a colleague or a friend.
We've got so much more in store, so be sure to join us next time for another exciting conversation. Until then, keep learning and keep growing in the generative age.